We're going to talk about my top 5 favorite minis in Warcraft Rumble. Shout out to Warcraft Rumble for sponsoring this video. And my favorite mini IRL is Kitty Cat, who is always on the table. So we're going to start with number 1 for me is the Safe Pilot. Now, the Safe Pilot is a outbound card, meaning you can deploy it anywhere on the map that's not like right on their tower, for instance. Has damage when it lands in an AoE, which can be used to clear some of the smaller mobs. Shoots AoE itself out of its cannon. It's a little bit squishy, if I'm being honest, but can be used to snipe chests, for instance, to counter other minions that are being deployed or minions that you see in stealth that your other units cannot hit. Can be used also to clear out things like chickens or things that have like a giant mass amount of mobs. So I mostly use Safe Pilot as sort of a utility pick. Grab chests, counter goblins, destroy things in AoE. It also can be used for DPS. So if you have like a tank up front and you can drop it behind the boss, for instance, in like PvE, and you can get some DPS in that way. It's a way to be aggressive as well as defensive. So Safe Pilot is a safe pick, if you will, excuse the pun. And so for that reason, it's going to be the first of 5 on my list today. Also has 3 cool abilities. Deploy twice as fast, burn nearby enemies, but dealing 33% less crash damage. So the first instance isn't as much, but it is easier to at least land the ability. I really wish I had this one, which polymorphs the first blaster target. So the first person you shoot gets polymorphed. For that reason, if they have like an abomination or something, like a strong unit up front, you can polymorph them with a cheap card. Deploy from the explosion with stealth can be quite useful. That way you at least get your first shot off as well. Don't have that one either. So for me at the moment, I've only got the coming in hot, which is pretty useful, at least for countering things defensively or trying to snipe those chests. Speaking of abomination, number 2 on this list today is the abomination. Maybe my favorite card in the game, but it's in the top 5 for sure. The abomination is extremely tanky and has a hook that can grab people and pull it in. Now, the thing about this is that this hook, if you, depending upon which of these abilities you have, fresh meat, after hooking a target, deal double damage on the next attack. So you can pull them in, get a little bit of damage that way as well. I have Cannonball, which makes it where I stun him when I deploy him, but then also he does an AoE stun when he hits half health too, which can be quite useful for AoE packs of mobs. Now, Nox is present, does poison nearby enemies every 3 seconds. I don't have that one yet, unfortunately. I haven't got to try it, but I would imagine you probably need the DPS because he doesn't really do a ton of DPS. He's mostly just tank, but his HP is pretty crazy. 22,000 HP for me at the moment, almost 23,000. So for that reason, I use him. I actually use him paired with my Alliance leader, Tyrion, even though he's an undead card, because he constantly heals the Abomination in front, and the Abomination becomes so tanky. Or I'll put Abomination out, and I'll pair him with our 3rd card in the list today, which is Drake. Now, Drake is a air unit that shoots fire in AoE. And because it's in AoE, it hits everything in the air and on the ground, because it can hit both of these types of targets. So extremely useful. It's only a 4-drop, so it's not too expensive. You can also drop it in tandem with Abomination in front, then Drake behind, and that's your full 10 gold if you're doing a full push like that. So for that reason, I like Drake defensively. Can be kind of used offensively, but mostly I use it when I see the enemies have a big pack of lower HP mobs going, and hopefully I have something in front to tank, because the HP of this mob is not very high. You can see I only got 1700 HP at level 16. I mean, compared to Abomination, doesn't have that much HP, right? Now let's talk about the abilities. So you have Mother's Drake, periodically summon a whelp egg. Pretty cool. Not much to say about that. Roost is one I really wish I had, which you can have him sit on top of your tower, basically, and just roast in AoE. Some more defensive properties. And again, I use them defensively. And then damaging enemies burns them, so you get some additional damage just from engulfing flame. So a little bit extra DPS. That's the only one I have at the moment, but Perch would probably be my favorite out of those 3. Now, number 4 on this list for me is Skeletons. Skeletons are another unit you can deploy anywhere on the map, and what Skeletons will allow you to do is sort of like Safe Pilot, snipe chests, but also there's 3 of them, so you can use them to sort of bait out single target damage. So if you have somebody that is pushing with a very strong single target damage unit, or like a Banshee, for instance, you can drop this unit down and sort of bait that type of damage, pull people out of stealth, etc., and then have some DPS behind them. You can use them to turn mobs around. So if you drop behind on somebody and they see him, they might turn around and try to hit them. You can use it on bosses too to try to bait the boss to turn around, or you can use it to actually DPS down turrets, etc. If they're like the flame AoE turret, for instance, attacking another direction. So for that reason, Skeletons can be used sort of like Safe Pilot as another utility to drop something anywhere on the map to bait the movement of enemies or claim chests, counter goblins that are mining gold. So there's a pretty good variety in terms of usability. I keep saying goblins, but I guess they're kobold miners is really what I think of them as, goblins, because goblins are like the greedy unit. But now, I've been mentioning health on all of these, so I'll mention one more time. They're not very tanky, so don't expect them to last very long. They're only a 2-drop, but that's not really the purpose of them. There's 3 of them. Like I said, you can use them for single target damage. The abilities aren't too inspiring. I think questing by these is interesting. You gain armor resistance and 1 gains stealth. So you can use that. The taunt is probably my favorite out of all of them. If I could get my hands on it, being able to use them to drop with taunt could be another utility use. And then exhume, which basically just gives you additional +2 of them if you drop them defensively on your turret or on a meeting stone. So not too exciting for the abilities, but they can't really have too many OP abilities. It's just a 2-drop currently in the game, but very useful 2-drop. Now, the 5th and final card for me is Banshee. This might be, if not Abomination, maybe this is my favorite card in the game. If we don't include leaders, that will be a separate video. So, Banshee is super interesting. Effectively, how Banshee works is it converts an enemy unit. So if they have a high priority unit, let's say an Abomination, a Golem, something expensive, nice here, they use a Golem in this example, then the Banshee charges forward and can actually steal that unit for your side. And depending upon the abilities that you have, you can make it where your possessed targets detonate and do extra damage. You gain Bloodlust for 10 seconds, so they're stronger. Or you can fully heal them, which I think the fully heal is probably my favorite out of all of those, because very often you're going to drop it defensively when one is like, let's just, again, I'm going to use Abomination as an example. Let's say their Abomination is pushing onto your turret. You then drop this. It's going to be half health by the time your Banshee gets to him anyway. Steals him, fully heals him, and now you have a fully healed Abomination, and it only costs you 4 for the Banshee. So for that reason, big fan. It does have the problem of being squishy. Look at 1100 health and he's level 18. It's a fairly fast unit, but it can get killed very easily by a unit that is charging at. So for that reason, I like to deploy it behind a tank or give it some support. Skeleton in front to change the aggro. We were just talking about Skeleton maybe, and then a Banshee. So there is a good variety in terms of way that you can play Banshee, but mostly you're going to use it defensively to steal a big unit or a unit that's a threat and turn that lane pressure around from one side. If they have an Abomination coming one side, you have no way to deal with it. You drop your Banshee, now suddenly they have an Abomination they have to deal with. So it's a pretty good amount of value that way if you can get the value out of Banshee. But again, very squishy, dies very easy, very weak to AoE. Things like Drake or air units that can snipe it down quickly while it's rushing towards you can be very scary. Also, Banshee comes out of Sylvanas Windrunner. It's one of the abilities. But anyway, that's for the leader video for later. So those are easily my five favorite minis. I would say there are some honorable mentions of minis that I do enjoy as well. I really, really, really like the Footmen, which is 4 units that drop at the same time, and you can put them sort of in between like a square of the different lanes, and they can split and end up going to whichever lane those minions left on, so you can kind of use them to double aggro. I guess you can do that with multiple different cards, but anyway, that's just an honorable mention. Let's do one other honorable mention for the fun of it. I like this card. I don't think this card's good, by the way. I think Living Bomb's probably not that great. It's a 6-drop, which is hyper expensive, but this is you can nuke people in AoE, so if they use like chickens or something and they have a high value target in the middle, they're using the example here of Drake and all that, you can get a really big AoE nuke. That should do it. If you want to download the game, the link is down below in the description. Shout out to Warcraft Rumble for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you guys on the next episode, which might end up being my favorite leaders. There are some leaders I want to talk about, and also probably do some PvP battles, so that'll be next.